Go
Lisa,
ahead.
does it show that it's recording?
Yep.
Okay, I didn't see it on mine. All right, thank you very much. So welcome again. We are happy to host Steve and Lisa from VLACs to talk to us about the virtual school out in New Hampshire. That, and you know, part of this conversation will be a little bit about the history of VLACs. And Steve, you can tell us about how long you've been out there, because honestly, I don't remember, but I know it's been a while, and kind of how you got started and why. And so we've got, you know, kind of a list of different types of conversation topics for all of us. And amongst those topics, or along with those topics, I should say, we encourage all of you to write your questions in the chat. And then either Steve and Lisa, you can see those and respond, or Lisa Sitkins will step in at various times and ask those questions. And if anyone wants to do a verbal back and forth with Steve and Lisa, you're very welcome to do that. Just kind of put that in the chat, and we'll make sure that you get your microphone opened up if we're the ones kind of controlling that, rather than from your end. So we really, really look forward to your participation on this. So I'll open it up. Steve and Lisa, you can take it over, and I'm looking forward to this. Thank you.
Thank you, Marcia, and good morning, Lisa. You haven't spoken this morning, and thank you for being here with me. Want to thank Marcia and everyone else for the invitation to share our work. It's something we are very excited about, and would love to answer any questions and learn from you as well. I'm coming to you from Kingston, New Hampshire, which is about 10 miles from the seacoast in New Hampshire. And I'm the CEO and co-founder of VLACs. Lisa, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. My name is Lisa Kent. I live in Amherst, New Hampshire, a little more central, but today I'm in our office, so not that far actually away from where Steve is right now. And I am a program manager for our learning pathways here at VLACs.
Thanks, Lisa. So I'll give you kind of an introduction to us and how we were formed and so forth. And then Marcia, I can, at that point, I have some slides where we can start talking about our pathways. And I'll try not to talk too long, and then stop once I give the general information. And then if it's okay, just open up discussion, and you know, we can answer whatever questions you have. So we're in, we last week just passed our 11th year in operation. Back in 2007, I was assistant superintendent in the Exeter School District, which is, again, about 7 or so miles from the coast. And our superintendent at the time had been asking me for a number of years, when are we going to be ready to create a virtual school? He was one of the first superintendents when the charter school law came about, who really saw the opportunity to help all kids. So I had the pleasure of designing a place-based, more of a traditional charter school, and that was probably back in I'm thinking 2003 or 4. We created what's called Great Bay Charter School, which is still in operation today and serves about 200 kids or so. And so a few years later, called me into the office and said, "Are we ready?" And I said, "I think the technology has evolved to a point where we could make that happen." And so I was able to do the design work to get VLACs started. And so when we opened, we started with about 40 teachers. We had, I think, 495 enrollments when we first opened. And then we were only part-time for the first semester. And then as we went into, from January into September, we opened our full-time program as well. And since that time, we've grown to about 14,000 individual students, about 28,000 enrollments. We have 400 full-time students. And we have, most of our students are going to be in New Hampshire, but we have about 100 out-of-state students who come to us and pay tuition. And they are from school districts, they are from parents who homeschool, they are from parents who just want something a little bit different for for their kids. Students in New Hampshire attend free of charge. That's funded by the state, not by any school district. So we avoid that kind of competitive edge that can be created when the laws require the money to come directly from school districts. We have always been competency-based, but we, I think, really shifted into being purely competency-based probably about our second year. When I say competency-based, I mean across the board funding as well as the way we work with our students. So as far as funding goes, we had the option of being attendance, receiving typical attendance-based funding, but I opted to design in that we only receive funding when students as students complete or move toward mastery. So if we have a student who completes all the competencies in a 1-credit course in 180 days, we get the typical funding. If they take 220 days, we won't earn complete funding until 220 days. If a student completes in 90 days, we would earn that funding in 90 days. We have a mixture of full-time and part-time instructors. They all receive salaries, but they're also based on completion, so that an instructor can never receive less as far as salary goes. But if they really learn to build relationships and help students move beyond or have more earnings than they were paid for, we pay them extra money. There's also, if you're interested in that, there's a research report that was sponsored by the Center for Innovation in Education out of Kentucky, and also I think co-sponsored by Nellie Mae and Southwestern Florida State, where they looked at our compensation and earning structure. So there's a lot of details there if you're interested. As far as competencies go with courses, no matter how students learn, everything has to be competency based. So everything we bring in that's new, we immediately change to being competencies. We also have something we call discussion-based assessments in all of our learning options, which means that before an instructor will sign off on a competency, they will also have a 20 to 30 minute discussion with a student to determine if they really have met the competency. So, for example, a student could have gotten done all outstanding work in all their assessments, whether it be formative or summative, but an instructor could still has that option as a professional to say, I think you need a little bit more study here before we move on. Also, we are flexible pacing, so students need more time, they can have it. If they want to accelerate, they can, and we're open enrollment, so we have students starting at any time during the year. So that's a bit about kind of the background of VLACs, and as we go on, if you have questions, I'm happy to answer that. What I did forget to add in is we have 230 employees. They live in 15 different states, the majority in New England. All are certified, and we use the reciprocal agreement, of course, if they come from outside New Hampshire to become New Hampshire certified. We feel our number one job is to build relationships. Our instructors spend a significant amount of time in video and voice chat with their students and with their parents. Matter of fact, we won't start a course or start any learning option until there's been a meeting with a parent and a student. And sometimes that takes extra time, but that's okay, because we really believe that parent interaction is very important. Parents do not teach in any way. They are there to be parents, but we really want the parents to be involved as supporters of their students' learning. So if I could, would it be possible to share desktop now? And I have a few slides.
Yep, I just sent you the request.
Great, I got it.
Okay, we can see your screen.
Great, thank you. So we have also, I'll make one step backwards. When we first opened, all we had were courses. We did add college dual credit courses soon after we opened, but really we did not have these 5 pathways. These 5 pathways, we were able to get funding from Next Generation Learning and Nellie Mae Education Foundation, and about 4 years ago, we went through a significant change in that. We felt we wanted to kind of move to the next iteration of VLACs, and that's when we really built all of these things. It's taken 3 to 4 years to really get everything in place. We rolled out many pieces of this along the way, but we're really getting to a point now where we feel that we're on solid ground with all these pathways. So as you might guess, we have a lot of courses. I think we're well over 200 courses right now. They're fairly traditional in nature, but they have all been changed to being competency-based. We've added those discussion-based assessments in to every single competency. But one of the things in our learning model, which we call customized learning, is we put the student in charge of deciding when, where, and how to learn. And so we think that's a significant difference with when compared to a traditional model where really the school is in charge of making those decisions. And those student-centric decisions that the students make are based on their needs, interests, and talents. So what that really means is a student can start in courses, say they're in an English class, and they may get to a competency and say, I really love writing. I noticed that we're coming up on a writing competency. Do I have to do this in a traditional course? And the answer is no. And a student might propose that they go work at a local marketing agency who they have called and contacted and say, you know, they've offered to let me work with a copywriter and really do some really cool writing. Could I do that? And a certified teacher will be assigned, and they will agree on what the assessments will be, and then they'll go forward with that. And then when they're done with the writing assessment, if they wanted to jump from experiences to back to courses, they can do that. The other thing they can work on are what we call projects. Projects, from a technical perspective, are performance assessments. They're designed to be 4 to 5 weeks in length. Each project is targeted at one single competency. And so, for example, in Mandarin Chinese, what we have created is it says that a student is to assume the role of an athletic trainer. The trainer is living in Taiwan, and they have 3 athletes who have injuries who they have to assess their injuries and then create a plan for rehabilitation. And of course, they have to do all of that in Mandarin Chinese. And so that's an example of the type of projects we have. We're closing in on 200 projects. The projects have the side benefit of introducing students to a career, and there are about 170 careers that students are introduced to through that kind of scenario that I just spoke about. So again, a student could jump out of a traditional course and jump into projects if they wanted to, and then jump back. So for each of these first three pathways, students really have a lot of latitude. Experiences is kind of what I mentioned before when I said they could go to a marketing agency. This is where a student can propose almost anything. They could say, I'd like to learn programming, but I want to do it on my own. What are the competencies, and here's how I'd like to do this. They may say, gee, I've got an opportunity to be an intern somewhere. Are there academic competencies that I could master while I'm working there? It could be travel. It could be starting their own company. One of the things that's happened over the last year is we've come up with this concept of planned experiences as well. So the first type of experience I was mentioning is really very custom, but a planned experience may be something like working with a local hospital where we'll set up a relationship with them, and they'll say, yes, we'd be happy to take 20 students, and we would work with them to match up competencies. Then a student would just have to sign up for that, and they would spend time at the hospital doing a variety of things. They would spend time with our instructors doing a variety of things, and in the end they would earn either career credit or academic credit. Another partnership that is really in the pilot stage right now is with First Robotics. Some of your schools may have a team, and in New Hampshire right now we're piloting with a number of schools, and they're earning academic credit in programming or engineering for their time with First. And if that's successful, we hope that First will, our partnership will expand beyond on New Hampshire, but that's just an example of the type of experiences we're looking at. Teams are really where students, a virtual team of kids from anywhere, come together and work on a common problem. So the problem could be, I want to learn to be a photographer. We have a photography team where not only will they learn about photography together, but then we'll also bring in a professional photographer in addition to the instructor to critique their work or help them with certain aspects of photography, those types of things. But we want to get that kind of collaborative opportunity going. And then in college, we offer, I think, a little over 30 college courses plus 15 AP, 12 or 15 AP classes. Students can take one college course if they want to. The only criteria for taking the course is that they have to finish Algebra 1 and sophomore English. Now, since kids can start any time, we haven't had this happen yet, but if an 8th grader had finished sophomore English or is in sophomore English and finished algebra, they could start a college course. Typically, we get students starting as usually sophomore year, sometimes freshman, a lot in the junior year. In addition to one course or a number of courses, they could finish a full year of college, or they could earn an associate degree while they're in high school with us. So those are our pathways. One of the things that we find, New Hampshire is a competency-based state. However, as you might guess, there are definitely different levels of being competency-based. There are some schools who are doing some pretty cool things, and there are others who are, even though it was required starting in 2008, are really not competency-based yet, but they're hopefully working toward it. And that creates some issues for us because we don't look at competency-based education as an end unto itself. It's what does this type of learning and assessment really allow for kids, and it really allows for customized learning. But if a student only masters one single competency and shows up on the doorstep of their school with that, it's difficult for the school to use. I mean, one alternative is to tell a student, well, that's great, but you still have to attend all the classes and take all the assessments. Another option is to say, well, you don't have to come in October, which isn't an option. So it creates a problem for traditional schools. So we have this concept of a backpack. We actually have a piece of software that when a student enrolls, it will say, if they select Algebra 1, it will say, how do you want to learn this? Do you want to do this through a course, through a team? I mean, through a course, through an experience, through a project, or a combination of them. They can select those. But in the end, we're able to take them and kind of group them all together and award a credit, which obviously is kind of the coin of the realm. And people will ask, well, how do you know if a student was in an internship that they really mastered the same competency? Well, in addition to the assessments that students would do or the exhibitions of learning, that discussion-based assessment becomes really important, because if we're talking about quadratic equations and a student is working with an engineer, it is possible that the student really didn't do much with quadratic equations, that they participated with the engineer and they did lots of cool things with math, but that will show up in the assessments and in discussion-based assessment. And in that case, what would happen is the instructor would say, well, we need to do additional work now. in order to really master this competency. And it may be more traditional work. It may be working on examples and so forth. Or they could go back to the engineer and say, I really need more work in this area. Can you help me? Another possibility is sometimes students will come to us and say, I want math credit, I want English credit, when in reality, the experience is going to be rich, but not in those areas. And what we do then is we usually ask students to consider working on career type competencies rather than academic, but we do both. What we're about to unveil over the next couple of months is our badging system. And the way we're defining badges is approximately 1.5 credits worth of work. So if it were in coding, it would probably be 3 semester courses or projects or whatever experiences of coding. But before we'll award a badge, we want a student who's interested in this area to have a real world experience. So we require that they spend a certain number of hours at a job site shadowing someone to really see what this is about. One of the things I often say, it's interesting how students will go off to college and say, I want to be an engineer, or a nurse, or a lawyer, or whatever they may want to be, and never have actually met a person who works in that particular area. And so we look at the badges really as career exploration. Because a student could earn multiple badges. They may try coding and say, I really like that. I thought it was something I wanted to do, but I'm not sure. I'd like to check out healthcare. I'd like to check out the arts, or I'd like to check out some other areas. So they can earn multiple badges. We're going to be using Badger to as kind of the library where the badges will be stored, and they can be posted to social media. They'll show up on students' transcript, and they can use them in whatever way makes sense. We're also going to be asking employers, do you consider this sufficient as an entryway into internships or possibly getting a job interview or those types of things as well? But those are yet to be determined, but we've talked to some employers and they seem very open to that. Beyond that, for the student who says, wow, this has really opened my eyes and I want to get into healthcare, is we're going to be offering options in industry certification, as well as continue to build our dual credit options so that students can go beyond this. What's not in this graphic is we're going to be offering additional courses in between the badge and industry certification. So if a student wants to get certified in a certain area, there'll be some advanced courses that will prepare them to take the test, sit for tests. For some kids, that will happen in high school. For others, they'll have to continue outside. We're also going to offer all of this at the adult education level, because I really believe there are lots of, I think for all of us who are educators, we know there are kids who struggle at the high school level. It could be due to family issues. It could be maturity issues. It could be a whole host of things. And even though we do our best to prepare them to be college and career ready, it doesn't always happen. But sometimes they get to a point in their life when they're 25, 30, or maybe older, where they say, gee, I wish I had an alternative. I'm not really ready for college, or I don't want to go to college, but I want to do more than I'm doing now. And we want to offer these same opportunities at the college level so that they can get industry certifications. So that's really a broad view of what we're doing and where we've come from. And Lisa and I are happy to answer any questions or go into some other topic if that's helpful.
For those of you who are on the call and maybe not on the webinar, Lisa did put it into the chat that she teaches in all of the pathways except the college pathway. So if you have any questions about being an instructor, she's happy to address those as well. So does anyone want to put any questions into the chat or ask, verbally get involved with a conversation? If you do, great. Otherwise, I know there are other questions other topics we can address.
So Brandon just asked, is discussion-based assessments the only form of assessment?
No, not at all. Lisa, you want to go into some detail there?
Sure. Thanks, Brandon. DBAs are not the only form of assessment. We do have what's called competency assessments, and those are assessments. They vary in their form. So it could be an exam, it could be a lab, it could be a discussion-based assessment. But the ones that are competency assessments, students are required to demonstrate an understanding at the competent level. So all of our rubrics are, if you will, sort of leveled by exceeds, competent, and approaching. Students need to get an 85 or better in order to move on. The variance of the assessments, sometimes it's written, sometimes it's verbal, sometimes if it's in the project pathway, they have options as to the modality that they choose for their deliverable. But no, the DBA is not the only one, but it is usually the most telling, if that helps.
Okay. Then could you explain the difference between academic credit and career credit? Does career credit count towards graduation?
Go ahead, Lisa.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry about that.
The word credit, I guess I'm going to go with, will be the same. So there's two different answers to this, right? We have our part-time students who are students that are coming to us from their zip code school. So how that school chooses to transfer, define, or award credit is still up to that local school. So should a student want to pursue our career exploration competency grouping, some schools may say that is elective credit. Some schools may say that it is in line with their advisory credit because it's career-based and they assign it in that way. Sometimes schools may say that while it was a career-based learning experience for this career exploration competency grouping, that there was enough of a content area in it that they award, let's say, PE credit for it. It does depend on the school that is housing, if you will, the student. I'll let Steve maybe say more if he wants to about the difference between our full-time students and our part-time, because for our full-time students, the career exploration is a graduation requirement for us.
Yeah, and we are authorized by the State Board of Education as a charter school, public school. We're also a nonprofit. So we have the full ability to award credits as well as to award diplomas. And so if we award a credit in a certain area, the assumption is that any school really probably in the country would transfer in our credit. We really haven't had any issues with that. We've never had credits turned away from any college. But as you might guess, you can get into the political issues where a school might say, well, I don't know if I want to accept your credit. So every once in a while, we do have a little pushback there. And what we've seen as school enrollments have started to drop is sometimes people will implement their own internal rules that say things like, well, gee, if we're offering calculus here, why should we accept your calculus? And that's not anything, we don't fight that. We allow that to be their decision. We also have at times where parents will say, well, you really should accept this. There's no reason that you shouldn't. So I'm going to send in, I'm going to counsel my student to send in 2 transcripts because ours has the same weight as any other transcript. So that just kind of adds a little bit of depth to what Lisa was saying. It's not a widespread issue. We really are. Our relationship with our schools, we work with every single high school in the state, most middle schools, and a good number of elementary schools who will send kids to us from 4th and 5th grade to work in our middle school area, and once in a while even at the high school level.
Okay. So Mickey, you asked a question about the pay structure set up for their staff. Steve did put in the chat box a link to a report that offers more information regarding their funding and compensation. But is there a specific question that you had, Mickey, that you'd like them to answer? Oh, she asked, what do you offer your staff to get them to buy in?
We've really never had an issue. I mean, we hire everyone who is an instructor for us is our employee. So if there's not buy-in, they wouldn't apply for jobs here. I mean, we really just are very fortunate. We have people who are just amazing, and they really understand that relationships are number one, and that's their primary job, other than teaching, is to be building relationships. So it just hasn't been an issue. Would you agree, Lisa?
Yeah, Mickey, I would say that it starts right from the beginning. You hear about the school. I was a brick and mortar teacher for 18 years at one of our high schools here in New Hampshire. And for a couple of years, I did both. I maintained my working as a teacher at the brick and mortar school while also being a part-time instructor here for VLACs. So I feel grateful to have now had both experiences, and it starts in the beginning, meaning you hear about it, you're intrigued, you're curious, you apply, and then you get here physically to this building and you go through the interview process, and the interview process really puts the power of choice in your hands. VLACs does a great job in that hiring process of being clear of what they do and what they expect of you, and then you choose to say, I want in or not. Then once you are in, I would say it, quote unquote, kind of sells itself. You are motivated to see student choice. You're, as any teacher knows, you're encouraged when you see how engaged the students are. The learning process is pure, and it's boiled down to its most basic sort of optimal learning environment where you're not worried about suspensions or fights or prom dates or the bells ringing or a pass in a hall. Like, there's a lack of white noise that really just allows you to develop a working relationship with the student to best provide and support for that student's learning. And that then becomes, quote, the buy-in.
Yeah, and also, thank you, Lisa. That was really helpful. One of the things to add is the interview process. We go through typical resume reviews whenever we're hiring, and then we have the first interview, which takes place over Zoom. And once we get beyond that and decide who we'd like to bring in for certain jobs, we have a full-day interview. The full day is dual purpose. It's for them to get to know us and us to get to know them. At the end of that day, we'll make offers, and many times we'll also have some folks that say, this was great, but this really isn't a good fit for me. And we really feel it's important, since they're going to be doing a lot of remote work, that we really take the time to get to know them through the interview process. And then we do come together twice a year. We try to have all 230 people there. We have what we call our Aspire conference, which is 2 days in August, where everybody is together. And then we also have a traditional graduation ceremony in June, where many of our graduates will come, and we get a good percentage of people from the staff who, if they're in traveling distance, will come.
Great. Thank you. That information was very helpful. Another question that's in the chat is, what are your biggest challenges or barriers?
I think two challenges. One is on the student information side, the infrastructure. We have, over the years, had a number of well, we've had 2 different student information systems, which we had to highly customize, as you might guess, to work. And we're really excited because over the next couple of months, we'll have a student information system that is really customized to our needs. And that's going to be rolling out, and it really is going to help our instructors in a lot of ways, because especially for instructors now who are experienced as teachers, there's a lot of kind of clerical work that they're having to do. If you can imagine a student coming to you, and each student is coming in and saying, I want to design my own course, that takes a lot of time to work with that. So we have a system coming where a student may say, when they sign up, they identify the competencies they want to work on, but the instructor will actually on a screen be able to drag the appropriate competencies into a student learning plan. The rubrics will come along with it, all those types of things, which right now is done in spreadsheets and other ways, which is just not sustainable. So because we're so unique, you really can't go out to a traditional student information system company and say, hey, can you make your product work for us? But we've been able to work around that over the years, and this new system really is going to allow us to work with a lot more students a lot more efficiently. I think the other thing is just going back to that concept of buy-in, is helping people to understand that we can be a partner in learning and we're not here as a competitor. I think we've done a really good job at that. When we look at the enrollment numbers I mentioned before, 72% of our kids come from traditional school districts. About 15% are homeschooled. The remaining percentages include our full-time students as well as private schools and out-of-state students. But you know, when we bring out new pathways and so forth, those aren't traditional opportunities in schools. So it takes some time for us to explain what they are and help them to understand the power that they can have in the student's educational plan. But it's not an insurmountable barrier. It really goes back to relationships, and we spend a significant amount of time. We have what we call our partnership opportunities, where people from a variety of schools will come in for a full day of training, and then we have people who will go out and check in on them once in a while, both virtually and sometimes face to face. So it just takes some work to make that happen. Lisa, do you have any other thoughts about barriers and so forth, challenges?
I might tier the word challenge. As an instructor, initially the challenge is the shift in mindset, where, you know, the first few months, and personally, I might have even extended that to maybe my first year, right? It takes a little while to get used to the idea that you might meet with a student who is starting on day one in 15 minutes, and then 15 minutes later, you'll be meeting with a student who is quote unquote graduating, if you will, from your course. So they're completing their competency group work with you all in the same day. So that is a little bit of a mind blown mindset when you're an instructor initially, to kind of step away from the whole you're moving students in a time-based model and you are not. That is kind of a level 1 challenge. The level 2 challenge that I had is I wasn't coming from a technology background. So there was initially some upstart and learning on a Mac or just the tools that we use in technology. And then after that, they become opportunity and not challenge. So that the initial challenge in the long run becomes your greatest opportunity when you start seeing how much parents can provide partnership and support, how great all the analytics that are available to you to best support your student, how quick you can get information on how often a student was looking at things, how long they were looking at things, when they submitted things. All of that data helps you to sort of hone in on a laser focus on where is the student tripping up or in need, and how can I figure out how to help that student. So the analytics end up being super helpful. Initially a challenge, later on an opportunity or a benefit. And on the student side of it, it's almost the same thing. Students sometimes are blown away, taken aback, not used to how much say, if you will, they have. They're used to being told what to do, when to do it, and it takes them a little while to get used to the idea that they have a voice and choice and flexibility and freedom, and learning those skills of time management, prioritization, and communication are super helpful in the long run, but initially challenging to them at first.
Great. Are there other questions?
I'm going to jump in for a second. This is Marcia. When you talked about your student information system, is that something that is going to be open to other districts to use at some point? I don't mean your particular one, but that product.
Yes, we're working with Motivus Learning, and you can, I think if you just Google Motivus Learning will pop up. Okay. They've been working mostly in higher ed, but we've been working with them since they opened a number of years ago. So we've had a relationship with them, and so they're doing some great work for us to make all this happen. And in addition to that, we also asked them to build something we called Connect. And we really see a need when students are involved in these external internships and visitations and everything, that students can have an easy way to connect with their back with their instructor. So they might be at a manufacturing plant and be doing something, and they want to create a quick video and then send it to their instructor or put it into a folder. And so they're creating an app for a mobile app that will allow them to do that. And what we asked them to do was to have it integrate with the Google Suite applications that almost all schools have access to. And then we want to offer this for free to anyone who wants to use it that might help them. So we're a month or two away from that being available. My guess is then we'll have to do some testing with it, and then what we're trying to do is make it available as one of the add-ons. So if you're familiar with G Suite, where you go in and you hit add-ons, that there'll be a way to connect, and then that information will show up in a student's folder, which will then be accessible by the instructor, and that it'll be easy to share information back and forth. So
that sounds exciting. I guess one of the other questions I have for you guys is what kind of impact is what you're doing having on brick and mortar, and vice versa?
I think we've, at the higher level, we've over time seen some schools really think about how everything works, and they start to question things. Like when we first opened, we had I remember a conversation where a principal said, so what this means is I have 8th graders who are taking Algebra 1, but when they get to my high school, that student doesn't get a credit. They can go into Algebra 2 or Geometry, but they don't get a high school credit. However, if they went to VLACs and took Algebra 1 as an 8th grader, they could actually transfer that credit into the high school level because you would be awarding high school credit. And the answer was theoretically yes, but instantly it created a discussion about, well, why aren't we awarding high school credit for the same course taken in 8th grade in our own district, separate from VLACs? So there were some really good discussions that happened there. I think also there are some schools who are talking about time. If you have to fail a student in June, but really they could have been successful if they had more time, is that an option? Others really fight that and are really, no, that's not right. If a kid can't meet all the competencies by a certain date, then they shouldn't get a passing grade. So it's been interesting. We've had a lot of instructors who have come to us full-time and part-time, and they stay with us, and then life changes and they may be part-time and then get a full-time job and they go back to their schools. And some of the feedback we get is, I've brought a lot of things I learned at VLACs into my traditional classroom. For example, the parent calls. A number of them have said, I start making parent calls as soon as I get a new group of kids, because I want to talk to them, build a relationship, so they know I'm here. But before there's ever an issue, they said, we really see the value of that. Plus, I think a lot of other pieces as well. Lisa, you must have some stories to share about how VLACs has impacted teaching in schools and so forth.
Yeah, even on my own personal story, when I was an instructor at brick and mortar, it's a touchy subject, I guess, a little bit, because everyone initial response, whether you're in-house in a brick and mortar or you're talking about brick and mortar as it works with VLACs, there's a big mindset internally, I think, for people to go into job protection mode. And so the biggest change that I have seen is we as educators, I think, are taught, or at least taught to repeat the phrase, in the best interest of students. Over and over and over again, we're asked, if you're going to do curriculum instruction assessment, what is in the best interest of students? And anytime you look at the opportunity for a student as a result of the partnership between a brick and mortar school and VLACs, and you say to yourself what's in the best interest of the student, it's really hard to then say, I'm going to go into job protection mode and not do what's in the best interest of students. So I now see schools and instructors across the state stopping acting in a silo. They are now collaborating. They're sharing and deprivatizing work, and we share the students, and you see instructors or teachers across the state acting on behalf of our area code and not on behalf of their zip code, if you will. And everyone in the state is starting to work together to provide all opportunity for all students. And I think that took a while for everyone to let their guard down, but I think we're getting there.
Okay, another question that came up in the chat is asking about funding sources. So if it's not attendance-based, how do you secure the funds?
New Hampshire schools, all public schools, have to send in enrollment data quarterly. And then based on that enrollment data, they're given 30% of their funding, of that funding. And so we do the same thing. So on July 1st, we will send in our enrollment data, and a few weeks later, we'll get 30%. So if you were to take that enrollment data and push it out for a full year, say it looked like we were going to earn $9 million that year, we would get 30% of that. And then what happens is in June, there's a reconciliation, so that if we, over the year, were sent $8.8 million and we actually earned $9 million, we would get an additional $200,000 to reconcile. And if for some reason the state overpaid us by $10,000, then they would subtract that from the next funding check. So it's all based on completion or competency. So when we send at the end of the year, we have to show that students have they've actually made progress in each of those areas. And that's why for a student who's met 80% of the competencies at the end of June, we're going to only be authorized to access 80% of the funding. The student can complete the other 20% in the next fiscal year, but we aren't going to get that money until the student completes that, versus the attendance model, which if they were present for 180 days, the full funding would come. That one of the things that was interesting is in that research report, they did a comparison and said, all right, we know how much VLACs earned using the completion-based funding model, but what if they were on attendance-based? And it was many millions of dollars more for the attendance-based compensation than it was for the completion-based, which not saying that this funding model would work in a traditional setting because they're so different, but it does work for us and keeps us accountable. And if any of you are familiar with what's happened in Ohio with some of their large cyber schools where basically the data didn't support the funding, this really prevents that, at least in my opinion.
So Steve, is that just for your full-time students, or are you getting funding from the state for the kids that are going to school? You said 85% of your kids, or sorry, 70% of kids come from other districts. Do those districts pay you? They get the funding, they pay you, or you get it from the state?
All from the state.
Okay. Are there any other questions?
I don't see any coming in. Anybody want to ask anything through their phone or microphone? Okay. Wow, thank you. There's a lot of information. I'm glad we record these because then we can all go back and re-listen, not just listen for the first time. So listen again and again. In fact, the webinar that you did a few years ago, that is still accessed all the time. So we appreciate you allowing us to revisit with you guys, and we look forward to staying in touch. And thank you so much. This has been great. I can only imagine that there might be a few follow-up questions with people, and if they reach out to me, I'm assuming that it might be okay to kind of connect you to some of them, if that sounds good.
Sure.
Good. Good. You guys have always been very open to helping us out. So thank you. Appreciate it. Thanks so much.
Thank you, everybody. Have a great day. Thank you, Marcia.
Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Thanks, Lisa. Bye-bye.